Mahmoud Darwish and Marcel Khalife, Soulmates. Hello, and thank you for listening. This introduction was presented preceding the concert by Marcel Khalife in Muziekgebouw Amsterdam on Monday the 25th of May. My name is Marianne Dagevos. I'm the initiator of Podium for Palestina, a virtual stage aimed to connect Palestinian literature and culture with Dutch readers and culture lovers. In this introduction, I will tell you a bit more about Mahmoud Darwish and about the connection between the Palestinian poet and the Lebanese artist Marcel Khalife. For over 30 years, they shared a deep personal friendship as well as a fruitful artistic collaboration. That is why I gave this introduction the title Mahmoud Darwish and Marcel Khalife, Soulmates. In order to tell you more about the roots of both Darwish and Khalife, I invite you to focus on a specific part on our globe. At the eastern borders of the Mediterranean, the most western part of the Asian continent, and the northern part of the African continent. You notice that I'm trying to avoid the colonial term Middle East. This region historically was called the Levant, or Balad Sham, the place where the sun is rising. It is a region characterized by many invasions, either coming from the sea or from the land or from both sides. Just to mention some, the Egyptians, the Phoenicians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Mongols, the Crusaders, the Arabs, the Ottomans, and in the 20th century again European invaders, the Allied forces, France and Britain, followed by Jewish Zionist colonizers. All those invaders left their traces. They settled, they looted, they constructed, they destroyed, and they mixed with the local populations. Some achievements of this mixed population worth mentioning are the Phoenician alphabet, new religions, irrigation works and terraces, urbanization, arts and crafts such as tatris. Some of the oldest trade routes and oldest cities in the world can be found in the Levant. The population of Balad Sham has always consisted of people with different religions, most notably Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and also representing different ethnicities, including present-day minorities such as the Kurds and the Druze, the Armenians, Circassians, Bedouins, and Samaritans. All these peoples, with their different religions and ethnicities, coexisted in this region for centuries. Moreover, it was easy to travel through the whole area, even using train connections, such as the Hijaz Railway. You could travel without impediments from Haifa to Damascus, from Jerusalem to Jaffa, from Gaza to Cairo. Zooming in on the landscape, it is striking how diverse and multifaceted it is. You can find a long coastline with beautiful shores, rivers flowing in different directions, several lakes, and also a lot of natural springs. There are mountains, hills and valleys, woods and orchards with olive trees, citrus groves, and other fruit trees. There are lush fields and pastures, and also desert areas with an oasis here and there. The Levant region is part of the Fertile Crescent, where agriculture used to produce so many different crops and in such abundance that it could feed far more people than just the local inhabitants. Monumental cities and smaller villages formed the hubs where the population lived and met each other for social, cultural, commercial, and religious exchange. Why am I telling you all this? Because both Mahmoud Darwish and Marcel Khalife are sons of this region, of the Levant, Balad Sham. Their roots are there, it is in their veins. This is the place they love and cherish and where they belong to. In many of his poems, Darwish made references to this region, to the landscape, the nature, the history, and the inhabitants, with their religious and cultural traditions. Many of you might know the poem by Darwish, Ala Hada al-Ard, on this earth or on this land. In this poem, he expresses his connection and his love for the land. Let us listen now to him reciting it.
على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. تردد إبريل، رائحة الخبز في الفجر، تعويذة امرأة للرجال، كتابات أسخيلوس، أول الحب، عشب على حجر، أمهات يقفن على خيط ماء، وخوف الغزاة من الذكريات. على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. نهايات أيلول، سيدة تترك 40 بكامل مشمشها. ساعة الشمس في السجن، غيم يقلد سربا من الكائنات. هتافات شعب لمن يصعدون إلى حتفهم باسمين، وخوف الطغاة من الأغنيات. على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. على هذه الأرض سيدة الأرض، أم البدايات، أم النهايات، كانت تسمى فلسطين، صارت تسمى فلسطين. سيدتي أستحق لأنك سيدتي، أستحق الحياة.
Most of you will know Mahmoud Darwish and perhaps even know one or more of his poems by heart. For those who are not yet familiar with the Palestinian poet, here a short summary of his life. Mahmoud Darwish was born in 1941 in the village of Al-Birwe in the Galilee in the north of Palestine. His family had a piece of land there that they cultivated. During the Nakba of 1948, the entire population was expelled from the village, and the family of Mahmoud Darwish fled to Lebanon. After 1 year, they ventured to go back to their homeland, which had been taken over to become part of the State of Israel. The houses of Al-Birwe village were all demolished, so the family had to look for another place to live. From that moment on, the Palestinians were labeled by Israel as present absentees, illegally staying in their own land. From 1950 to 1970, Mahmoud Darwish lived in this new state. He worked as a journalist until he could no longer bear the harsh military rule. He went to Moscow to study, later to Egypt, and in 1973 he joined the PLO, which brought him to Beirut, where in that time the PLO headquarters were located. In 1982, when the Israeli army besieged Beirut, the PLO members were forced to leave. Darwish went into exile and spent 10 years in Paris. In 1993, he resigned from the PLO because he did not agree with the Oslo Accords. From 1995 until his death, he was granted permission to live alternately in Ramallah and Amman, which enabled him to reinforce the encounters with his Arab readers and listeners. Darwish died in 2008 in Houston due to the complications of heart surgery. He had a weak heart, perhaps also a broken heart. And he was buried in Ramallah, where you can visit his mausoleum next to the museum that is dedicated to his life and work. When his body was transferred from Houston to Ramallah, Marcel Khalife had the opportunity to bring a tribute to him in Amman, leaving a rose on his casket. Mahmoud Darwish was a poet for 47 years. He published more than 30 poetry collections and 10 books in prose, which were translated into many languages and are still being published and republished. He is considered the greatest Palestinian poet of the 20th century and one of the most important poets of Arab literature. He is praised for his lyricism, the richness of his use of the Arabic language, and his innovative force. Mahmoud Darwish not only wrote poetry, he also loved to recite it, as is the custom in the Arab world. In this beautiful video, we hear him reciting the opening of the last poem he wrote before his death, in translation called The Dice Player, in which he reflects on his life.
من أنا لأقول لكم ما أقول لكم، وأنا لم أكن حجراً صقلته المياه فأصبح وجهاً، ولا قصباً ثقبته الرياح فأصبح ناياً. أنا لاعب النرد، أربح حيناً وأخسر حيناً. أنا مثلكم أو أقل قليلاً. ليس لي أي دور بما كنت، لو أن ذاك المكان الزراعي لم ينكسر ربما صرت زيتونة أو معلم جغرافيا أو خبيراً بمملكة النمل أو حارساً للصدى. من أنا لأقول لكم ما أقول لكم؟ ربحت مزيداً من الصحو لا لأكون سعيداً بليلتي المقمرة، بل لكي أشهد المجزرة. نجوت مصادفة، كنت أصغر من هدف عسكري وأكبر من نحلة تتنقل بين زهور السياج، وخفت كثيراً على إخوتي وأبي، وخفت على زمن من زجاج، ومشى الخوف بي ومشيت به حافياً ناسياً ذكرياتي الصغيرة عما أريد من الغد. لا وقت للغد، لا وقت للغد. أمشي، أهرول، أركض، أصعد، أنزل، أصرخ، أولول، أسرع، أبطئ، أهوي، أخف، أجف، أسير، أطير، أركض، أنسى، أرى، لا أرى، أتذكر، أسمع، أبصر، أهدي، أهلوس، أهمس، أصرخ، لا أستطيع، أسقط، أعلو وأهبط، أدمى ويغمى علي.
Marcel Khalife and Mahmoud Darwish not only shared an artistic collaboration based on mutual admiration, they also were close friends for over 3 decades. They met each other for the first time in Beirut in the late 70s, and met again later in Paris, where both lived in exile. When asked about their friendship, Khalife recalls that in 1976, while confined to the village of Amchit during the Lebanese Civil War, he first started reading the poems of Darwish. At that time, he did not yet know the poet personally. He tells, "But it felt as if those poems were specially written for me, and I began composing melodies for them. When I eventually met Mahmoud Darwish during an evening gathering, he called out to me and said, 'Come here, young man.' So I went over to him and he asked, 'How is it you compose music for these poems? Don't you know they belong to a poet?' I replied, 'Yes, they belong to you.' And he said, 'Why didn't you ask me first?' And I answered, 'I thought they were public property, so I set them to music.' And that was how my friendship with him began, a friendship that lasted a lifetime." A poem that was particularly dear to the heart of both is I'm Not Feeling Well, Mama. I Long for the Bread of My Mother. This poem expresses the value of daily life, the small habits and rituals which give rhythm and meaning to the day. It also expresses the longing of the poet for everything that is lost, his youth, his family life, and the love of his mother. In an interview recalling memories of his childhood, Darwish tells that his mother was very affected by the loss of their house, their land, and the orchards she used to cultivate. When they returned to their homeland in 1949, she used to be angry and aggressive toward her children. It was not until 1956, when I was in prison, Darwish explains, where my mother came to visit me, that I noticed that she did love me. She brought coffee and fruits, she embraced and kissed me. Both for Darwish and for Khalife, daily life is precious and worth writing and singing about. You could interpret this poem, I'm Longing for the Bread of My Mother, as symbolic, viewing the mother as a symbol for Palestine and the bread as a symbol for freedom. But it is my guess that for both artists, the intimacy of daily life, the encounters between a mother and her child, and the shelter and refuge a mother offers to her children, in itself are worth bringing a tribute to. Enjoying daily life and celebrating every aspect of it can be seen as acts of resistance. And this sentiment obviously resonates with many of us, as both the poem by Darwish and the song by Khalife are among the most popular of their repertoire. Now you can watch a video where the famous poem is recited by a female voice.
أحن إلى خبز أمي وقهوة أمي ولمسة أمي، وتكبر في الطفولة يوما على صدر يوم، وأعشق عمري لأني إذا مت أخجل من دمع أمي. خذيني إذا عدت يوما وشاحا لهدبك، وغطي عظامي بعشب تعمد من طهر كعبك، وشدي وثاقي بخصلة شعر بخيط يلوح في ذيل ثوبك. عساني أصير إلها إلها أصير إذا ما لمست قرارة قلبك. ضعيني إذا ما رجعت وقودا بتنور نارك، وحبل غسيل على سطح دارك، لأني فقدت الوقوف بدون صلاة نهارك. هرمت فردي نجوم الطفولة حتى أشارك صغار العصافير درب الرجوع لعش انتظارك.
When Darwish lived in the Galilee, his now occupied homeland, he met Jewish migrants there, now citizens of the new state, and he interacted with them. On the one hand, he had confrontations with soldiers and state authorities who were oppressing the Palestinians. On the other hand, he met inhabitants of the kibbutzim, settled on stolen Palestinian land. Darwish knew Hebrew, and he had read the Jewish Holy Scriptures. He was inspired by the Psalms and the stories in Genesis and Exodus, and he referred to these texts in his work. At least two poems elaborate on these meetings with Jewish migrants: The Soldier Who Dreamt of White Lilies and Rita and the Rifle. Although Rita was not her real name, we know that Darwish had a love affair with a Jewish woman, which inspired him to write this poem. It is a love song with a twist, because their love is doomed. There's a rifle standing in between them. Marcel Khalife and Mahmoud Darwish not only share their love for the land and the landscape, but also for the people of that land, whether mothers or lovers. Moreover, very importantly, they share the love for the language of that land, the Arabic language. They cherish its lyricism and rhythm, its vocabulary and tone. I think the beauty of the Arabic language is particularly striking in this love song for Rita. Let us now listen to a fragment of the poem, bearing in mind the composition by Khalife.
بين رتا وعيوني بندقية، والذي يعرف رتا ينحني ويصلي لإله في العيون العسلية. وأنا قبلت رتا عندما كانت صغيرة، وأنا أذكر كيف التصقت بي وغطت ساعدي أحلى ضفيرة. وأنا أذكر رتا مثلما يذكر عصفور غديرة. رتا، بيننا مليون عصفور وصورة، ومواعيد كثيرة أطلقت نارا عليها بندقية. اسم رتا كان عيدا في فمي، جسم رتا كان عرسا في دمي. وأنا ضعت برتا سنتين، وهي نامت فوق زندي سنتين. وتعاهدنا على أجمل كأس، واحترقنا في نبيذ الشفتين. وولدنا مرتين. رتا.
Obviously, Khalife was not only inspired by the love songs by Mahmoud Darwish. He also admired his poems reclaiming the rights of the Palestinians and supporting the Palestinian struggle for liberation and self-determination. Both for Darwish and Khalife, the personal was political and politics were never distant. With experiences of war, destruction, displacement and loss, you cannot ignore how politics interfere in your personal life. Poets in their role as representatives of their people, expressing the feelings of their people, become public figures who often suffer detention and prosecution themselves. Both Darwish and Khalife have witnessed that. In occupied Palestine, Darwish was detained and kept under house arrest several times, and later he was forced to live in exile, just like Khalife, who lived in exile due to the civil war in his homeland. Their friendship was based on shared experiences, recognizing the same sentiments, supporting the same values, and maintaining the same professional standards. When in 1999 in Lebanon, Khalife faced blasphemy charges over a song based on Darwish's poem, "O My Father, I Am Yusuf," Darwish sent a powerful letter of support, calling the trial sad and shameful, and part of a suspicious campaign against creativity. This demonstrated their mutual commitment to artistic freedom against political and religious censorship. The most well-known collaboration between Mahmoud Darwish and Marcel Khalife when it comes to their shared sentiments of displacement, loss and exile is Khalife's interpretation of the poem The Passport, Jawaz al-Safar. You can listen now to an interpretation by Nai Barghouti. This Palestinian singer represents a new generation of artists from the Levant with a very special charisma, as you will see in the video.
لم يعرفوا في الظلال التي تمتص لوني في جواز السفر وكان جرحي عندهم عرضا لسائح يعشق جمع الصور لم يعرفوا في الظلال التي تمتص لوني في جواز السفر وكان جرحي عندهم عرضا لسائح يعشق جمع الصور لم يعرفوني لا تتركي كفي بلا شمس لأن الشجرة يعرفني تعرفني كل أمان المطر لأن الشجرة تتركيني شاحبا كالقمر كالقمر.
Mahmoud Darwish used to say, "As a Palestinian, I'm open to others." Palestine has always been a crossroads of people who stayed here for a shorter or longer period. I carry all these different cultures within me, and I cherish them. Canaanites, Syrians, Greeks, Romans, Persians, Egyptians, and Arabs. When we look at the situation in the Levant nowadays, the picture is very bleak. Borders, gates, and fences have obstructed the freedom of movement in the region. It is impossible to make the journeys between Cairo, Gaza, Jaffa, Haifa, Jerusalem, Beirut, and Damascus that were so common a century ago. Vast parts of the regions have been devastated by relentless violence and warfare. Many inhabitants are displaced, having lost their homes and livelihoods, and even people in the Fertile Crescent nowadays suffer from hunger and thirst. Both Darwish and Khalife identify with the oppressed and the defeated, those who could not and cannot withstand the ruthless violence of the oppressors, whose existence is always in jeopardy. We know the examples, the indigenous people in colonized countries such as Palestine, but also the Native Americans, and back in the time, the Jews and Arabs who were expelled from Al-Andalus in Spain. We know the examples, but they need to be given a face and a voice in order to acknowledge them. Artists do that. Artists can change the defeated from ignored and marginalized objects or numbers into subjects, real people we can identify with. In the poem We Travel Like All People, Darwish wrote, "We live in a country of words," expressing the experiences of refugees, displaced people without a home and homeland. People are always on the move, traveling, drifting, not knowing what their future will look like. And by turning these particular experiences into poetry, the personal becomes collective, a collective sentiment that we can all relate to. That is another role artists perform. Express personal, intimate sentiments so that we as a collective can recognize them and identify with them. In that way, both through poetry and music, we can cry together, we can mourn together, protest together, rejoice together, and share hope together. I wish for all of us that art will bring us that privilege to merge our personal feelings into a collective experience of consolation, connection, and community. I end with a clip by Rufaida, a young Moroccan-Dutch singer who was also inspired by the poetry of Mahmoud Darwish, more in particular the poem We Travel Like All People, Nusafiru Kennas. She transfers the poem to the present because the footage for this clip was recorded in Gaza by Gazan filmers. Thank you for your attention.
The Palestinian struggle is not just a cry for justice.
لنا بلد من كلامنا تتكلم لأسني الدربي على حجري من حجر. لنا بلد من كلامنا تتكلم لأسني الدربي على حجري من حجر.